Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kakis, and today we have a very important episode because Shawna James, Senior Manager of Community at PreSales Collective, is hosting Cindy Goodwin-Sak, Vice President of Global Sales Engineering at Anomoli, to discuss the State of Diversity Report 2023. In 2021, the PreSales Collective released a State of Diversity Report for the entire profession. Our goal was to benchmark diversity metrics in our industry to better understand the gender and ethnic makeup of pre-sales. So you might be wondering, where is the 22 report? Well, about 6 months ago, we decided to make a massive investment in this report. And so today's episode, you're going to hear Shawna and Cindy, who are spearheading this effort, discuss our much larger and more comprehensive survey in 2023. Why is this so important? Because we've partnered with PhD researchers, pre-sales executives, and other people who are qualified in the advancement of DE&I programs and initiative across our industry and within the profession. Shawna and Cindy are going to discuss what this report is, the why behind this report, and how you can get engaged and involved as we play our part at the PreSales Collective in helping create a more diverse pre-sales profession. Enjoy today's episode.
Hi there, my name is Yuji Higashi, co-founder of PreSales Collective, and I have big news to share with you if you're a pre-sales leader or an individual contributor early in your career. We recently launched 2 training and enablement programs aimed at helping you take your career to the next level. Both programs were created by pre-sales leaders with input from dozens of SC veterans across our community. Now, we'll be running cohorts each month, so if you're interested in participating, visit us at presalescollective.com/enablement to submit an inquiry, and we'll send you details about each program, including this curriculum and schedule. We look forward to working with you on growing your career and being part of your career journey. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Cindy, I am so happy to be speaking with you today. It's so wonderful to see you. How are you doing?
I am great, Shawna. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm doing well. I feel like this conversation has been such a long time coming. I'm so happy to be sitting down and talking about our work together.
Oh, me too. Me too. This is so exciting. And yes, we've put quite a few months into this so far.
Yes, and we have many more months to go. I'd love to start out by just giving a little context. Cindy and I were introduced to each other when I first started my role at the PreSales Collective, and we didn't know how exactly we were going to work together. But I think the impetus of our work together, that sort of spark between the both of us when we sat down and really started to talk about the things that we cared about in terms of DE&I, pre-sales, and how to connect the two in a really robust way, really started us out for I hope, a lifelong collaboration around this work. I'd love to start out by telling a little bit of the story of how we were connected. Cindy, I'll pass it over to you and I'll sprinkle in some notes as we go along.
It's funny how people's memories are different. So I'm sure we'll have slightly different versions of the story. But I was so excited to see the work that the PreSales Collective had done already around diversity and the survey that came out last year. And I really wanted to participate this year. And so I reached out to James and asked, how can I get involved? And I felt like I might have a little bit more qualification than I had previously to participate. I had just finished my PhD or my doctorate in March, and I had actually started shifting my research. I was researching trust. And I was researching trust actually in a pre-sales context. And I started to research my own environment. So as I moved up through my organization at my previous company, I noticed my environment was changing around me. And so I started to do research on diversity and inclusion and at the executive level. And so I was super excited to participate in this survey with you all. And James connected us up, and it was fantastic from the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah. Around that time in March, I was given the DE&I program that we currently had to sort of run and think about. And some contextual background for me, I have been doing DE&I work for years, mostly in the 501c3 nonprofit sector, programmatically and also internal organization-wide in strategic planning. And when I joined the PreSales Collective, I was transitioning into tech for the first time. This was my first role in technology. And one of the fears I had was that I wouldn't be able to do this work that was so important to my ethos as a person. And I wanted to make sure that there was some liveliness around DE&I and the work that I was going to be doing in community. Now, thankfully, when I was applying for this job, I saw that the State of Diversity report had been released. I was relieved that this was a conversation that was already happening. And so when I took on this role and I took on this program, I really wanted to think about, how can we build on the work that we did last year? What does it look like to grow on previous research? And how can we ultimately give our community more resources and information to thrive in their roles? PreSales Collective as a learning and development community is essential for the pre-sales industry as a place for folks to really become heavily resourced, not only in subjects that they're aware of, but subjects that they want to learn more about. And I think DE&I sits in that category of something that folks really want to learn more about, but they need to be properly resourced. So when I was thinking about growing this program and I was looking for who was going to be on my team, James mentioned you, Cindy, and I got to learn a little bit more about you. I watched you speak on one of our webinars, and I said, I have got to get her on this team. And it's the easiest ask I've ever had to make, not because your time isn't super valuable, but because you were so excited and you were so engaged with the work that we were doing. We had this first call, and I'll never forget it, that I was driving upstate to go on vacation, and we had stopped at this rest stop because I needed to walk my dog. And it was you, me, and James on a phone call. And I want to believe that the call lasted for like 3 hours. I'm pretty sure it was only like 45 minutes, but you and I just got on such a hot button about how to appropriately research and resource a community. What are the things that are missing in pre-sales? And we were batting back and forth and batting back and forth. And finally, there was this healthy lull in the conversation. And I said, well, we're doing this. We're doing it bigger and better than last year. And I'm so grateful that you've taken on this project with me and the team at PreSales Collective. I know we're going to be better for it. Before we dive into this project and this program, I'm curious if we can talk a little bit about why DE&I is important to the both of us, because I think it is helpful contextual background for folks to understand, why we're taking on this project.
I remember that meeting. It was fantastic. Would you like to share a little bit about what is driving your passion around DE&I?
Yeah, absolutely. My relationship to DE&I and this work is both personal and professional. The personal piece is that I'm biracial. I was raised Jewish. I grew up in California, went to school in Boston, and I was really healthily resourced throughout my life to learn a lot about my culture and about the culture of others. And as I started to get older, I realized that access didn't really exist for a lot of people. I also started my career in the arts, and I was really privileged to get access to a lot of opportunities to meet other artists like myself, and also different artists. And in that curation process, I really realized that I had a huge passion and drive for work around DE&I, not only helping make sure that my lived experience was one where I was always giving back to the community, but I was also helping others understand their place and how to have these conversations. I think having conversations around DE&I are really tricky. And I've always found that being a healthy communicator around these things is essential. So I have really dedicated my life and my craft as I moved from the arts and then now work in technology to really make sure that I'm continuing these conversations and helping people resource to have these trickier conversations. Professionally, when I started working in the 501c3 nonprofit space, I really realized that there was a huge gap between how people thought what DE&I should be and what was actually being actioned. I think that delta was so big when I first started working. I really wanted to find a way to bridge the gap. And I think as we, can acknowledge that, again, these conversations are tricky to have and folks feel like they may be getting things wrong and they don't know how to talk about race or equity or inclusion or gender. I really wanted to demystify it and dedicate a lot of my career and passion to demystifying these terms and making sure that they're accessible to everyone. So it's important to me for that reason, because I think we're all better for having that information and being armed with it going forward. How about you, Cindy?
I love that. That's fantastic. And oh my goodness, you have such a diverse background. My reason is actually a little bit different. I was always the only girl. So, there aren't that many women in technology. And I was growing up, I was always the only girl in a lot of my classes. When I got to college, I went into computer engineering, again, the only girl. I actually switched to math, and there were women in the room, but they were all teachers. So I was looking at it more from an engineering perspective, and those were all men. So I wasn't uncomfortable with the position I ended up in as a technologist, being the only female for the majority of the time. But it got interesting when I started to realize the privilege that I had. And I started to discover this when I talked with others inside my previous company. I met several Black women at a women's event, and they described intersectionality. And I had never heard of this before. It just wasn't something I ever came across. I didn't understand how narrow my view of diversity was at the time. And so it really opened my eyes, and it made me think there is so much I'm missing in this conversation. And then I went to speak at several technology events, and I went to talk and I spoke about diversity. And I sat in the speaker room with other individuals, and they may not have been speaking about diversity. They may have been speaking about technology topics, but I talked about what I was going to share, my experiences. And I was surrounded by white men, and I shared my experiences, and they said, "Cindy, it's the same for us." I was blown away. Everything that I had internalized and I had attributed to my gender wasn't necessarily true. It was actually shared experience. It was human experience. And so for me, you're right. These conversations are really difficult. There are very few women. There are very few minorities in technology. We've got to figure out how to fix that, largely so that we represent the world around us and that we can have better conversations. And we'll talk about it. It's just good for business too. It's good for society and good for business. But I think the thing that really drives me to talk about this is to make sure that we are including all points of view and all perspectives, that we're all humans in this conversation and we all have something important to share about it.
Cindy, I really appreciate that perspective. And it reminds me of something that I want to mention here. And as we continue to do this survey and collect this report and ultimately do this summit in the spring, spoiler to everyone who's listening, that there is a kind of humility that we all need to approach this work with. And Cindy and I talk about this a lot, that this work is only going to get done if we all have the humility to talk and acknowledge what we do not know yet, and that we are curious to learn. And we look forward to inviting, everyone to the table to have this conversation with us and help move the profession forward together with that kind of humility. So thank you so much, Cindy, for bringing that to the table.
If I may, going back to that first conversation we had, there was a tense moment. I don't know if you remember this, but I was stuck in my worldview of being a white woman in a male-dominated environment. You said, "Cindy, I'm passionate about studying ethnicity." And I had this gut check. Deep in my gut, I went, "Oh my gosh, Cindy, you've forgotten that the world is bigger than you. The world is not about Cindy. The world is about everyone." And to your point about humility, it was gut-wrenching when I realized how narrow my perspective was at the moment. And it sucks to have that feeling. But if we can all get there, I think we should actually be striving for the gut check, because that's where we grow. And that's where we learn and become better humans, because we alter our worldview and become willing to see more perspectives.
Thank you, Cindy. So I'd love to move a little bit into the report and the work we're doing. Why do you think this report is essential and needed in our industry?
Well, I don't think we're making enough progress. I'll just say we aren't. I know we're not making the progress we want to make. And as a matter of fact, I think we're moving backwards. I think the pandemic did quite a number on a lot of underrepresented individuals in technology. And we need to change the conversation to be one that's more honest and a lot deeper about what's preventing us from making progress. And so for me, this report is about laying a foundation, understanding who is in our community and getting access to that community so we can elevate the conversation, have deeper discussions around solving the problem, and then continue to measure our progress.
Just building off of that, I think that there is so much about DE&I that feels mysterious to people. I believe everyone at their core has an incredible positive intention to help continue to make sure that their colleagues and peers are thriving. But the piece that's missing is the tools to do that. And so when we're thinking about this report holistically, we need to gather data from our community, from the international pre-sales industry as a whole, to understand what is going on. Why are these things happening? And through our work, because in case this hasn't been noted already, we're going to do this report. We're going to run this survey every year so we can benchmark over time how we are growing and where we are not growing. And what we can do with this report is then give people resources to make sure that these DE&I programs that are currently happening, not happening yet, or could be doing better, actually work. I want to be clear that there are DE&I programs that work, that they work really well. And what we want to make sure is that every company who wants to do this work has the ability to do it. And as we know, the pre-sales industry is grotesquely under-resourced in many different categories. And this is one of the areas that we can help resource people to do this work better.
Absolutely. I think, however, that the companies that are doing this well, the programs that are effective, are few and far between. As I was studying my own situation, I wanted to understand the perspectives of others around me. So I found that as I moved up in the hierarchy of a large organization, it became less inclusive. And so I was researching a lot of reasons why, programs, those kinds of things. And I actually came across a large body of research that says the majority of corporate DE&I programs are focused on training, and they're focused on diversity training. And if you think about your traditional diversity training at a corporation, it's all the things you should do and shouldn't do. Like, here are the bad behaviors. And really, they don't tell you what the good behaviors are. Here are the bad behaviors. And so when you receive a training that says, here are the bad behaviors, you just sort of feel like you've done something wrong. And what we're learning is that coming out of a lot of these trainings is a concept called backlash, that I feel attacked for who I am. And I've been told I'm bad as a result of these trainings. Now, that was never the intention. No organization wants to make their people feel bad. But I think a lot of these trainings were developed without research, without study. And so we're finding that actually, in some cases, they may be doing harm instead of actually creating a more inclusive environment. I'm curious about your perspective on that.
The hardest part about this is that we know that the intention has always been positive for these programs to work. And I think that oftentimes when we think about bettering the industry, we think about leveling the playing field. But if we're going to level the playing field, we have to equally resource everyone and also recognize who hasn't been resourced. It's the model of the seat at the table. If there has been the same people who have had a seat at the table and you want to invite someone new, you not only have to make space at the table, you have to give them a seat, and you also probably have to position them at the table so that there is more equity in the room. And I think that oftentimes folks start to think about that and they say, okay, well, that makes sense when you talk about a table model, but how do I apply that at a corporate job where there are structures and HR? I think that the point we are trying to make and the work that we are doing is really around making sure that everyone has the opportunity to rise together and are equitably resourced to do so.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
Can you talk a little bit about the hypothesis that we are working with right now to do this research and why we think this hypothesis is credible for the pre-sales industry?
So I think we have several hypotheses based on some of the initial research that I've done. And one of them is that DE&I programs are causing backlash, or traditional DE&I programs are causing backlash. And not just the traditional program, but the mandatory nature of those programs is causing that. And so it's one of the things we want to understand is what types of programs or what types of training are our community taking through their organizations. Additionally, through the pandemic, the other hypothesis is that during the pandemic, being a primary caregiver actually created a lot of challenges for anyone, not just about pre-sales, but all job functions. And that what few women or minorities that we had in our group and in our pre-sales collective may have been disproportionately impacted by that. And so we want to get a better understanding of who are the primary caregivers, and maybe not just for children, but for elderly as well. And just do those primary caregivers have support structures in place to help them? And I think those are critical things to understand. And I take that last one from my own experience, going into an executive role or knowing that I was going to have a global career trajectory. My husband and I had a conversation, and he chose to become the primary caregiver. He schedules all the doctor's appointments, and he always made sure that the daycare was arranged correctly. So I had the benefit of that. So my personal hypothesis is that not all women and not all minorities have that benefit of that support system in their world.
Absolutely. And just to tack on to that a little bit, one of the things that you and I talked about when we first started to engage about this is around what happened in 2020 during the pandemic and during the social and political uprising following the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor that sort of nationally and globally swept the nation to look deeper at the problems that were plaguing our country and our world. And what we know is that a lot of companies, big companies, very public companies, released statements in support of DE&I, and they put it on their website. They were very public about denouncing violence against folks of color and minorities and women. And that swept the nation. I was living in New York at the time, and I remember how jarring it was to see all of these companies make the statements. But they made the statements, and then it seemed like nothing happened after that. But what we know is that some of these companies actually created programs. They took this next step. They wanted to create DE&I programs. And they also created new hiring practices to support the advancement of women and minorities in the workplace. We saw this especially in the technology world. But what happened, or what we think happened, is that these folks were promoted or brought in as a direct response to this uprising and as a direct response to these companies trying to get it right, but were not appropriately resourced to stay in the industry. And while we want to be clear that the advancement of women and minorities and folks of color in the workplace is essential for a thriving business, it is incredibly important that we think about if you're inviting someone to the table for the first time and you're making them stand instead of giving them a seat, we want to understand, specifically in the pre-sales industry, how this has affected the members of our community. Have the members of our community felt appropriately resourced to stay in the industry? And if they haven't, have they left?
I want to go into appropriately resourced. You've said that a couple of times, and I am not as articulate as you are, so it doesn't roll off the tongue. But it's interesting. So put yourselves in the shoes of someone who's been at the table, and they say, well, you got the same training I did. What does it mean to not have a chair? I think it's important to understand that the dynamics of human behavior are different for different individuals. So I, as a woman, may not feel comfortable asking a man to mentor me, to give me guidance, to help me through a process, whereas a man might feel comfortable asking another man to do that. And actually, the research says that. The research says that just because they have similarities, a man is, especially a white man, is more likely to mentor another white man. It's just somebody who looks like me. And so it's comfortable. And so being resourced isn't just about training. It's not just about onboarding. It's about mentorship and being surrounded by emotional support, mentorship, and those kinds of things. I think that's something that's missing significantly from this conversation around diversity and what it means to be included. So, Shawna, I'm so excited you have this role at PreSales Collective. It just warms my heart, and you're just the perfect person to run this program. How do you see PreSales Collective actually playing an active role in changing the industry standard for DE&I?
One thing I think is important to note is that the PreSales Collective has an incredible access to community. We were founded as a community of interest to help pre-sales professionals all around the globe have access to resources to exceed and excel in their careers that had never existed before. And as we've grown over the years, we've realized that in order to approach this work holistically, we need to think about how we are making sure that every pre-sales professional has the valuable resources that they need to succeed. And one of the pieces that I think the founders, Yuji and James, realized that needed to be included in the conversation is around DE&I. You know, we have these conversations in the Pre-Sales Academy a lot. Part of changing the industry is changing the canon, changing the pipeline. If the same types of applicants are applying to the roles, then those same type of applicants are going to be getting the roles. But the Pre-Sales Academy, with the diversity that it has and the students that it brings through the program, is helping change the canon to help make sure that more diverse candidates are getting inside of industries and helping change the industry. As we know, diversity wins every time. It helps win deals. It helps close deals. It helps make for more thriving work environments. I think PreSales Collective is trying to play our part in making sure that we are not only speaking about the programs that we're doing and trying to work on our own terms, but we're providing data back to the community, which is why this survey is so important. And it's important that everyone fills out the survey because we want to make sure that we are not only saying our hypotheses, but they are backed by data. And I can't wait to see what the survey shows us. And so I think over time, as we continue to engage in our community and continue to ask folks to give us real feedback, what we'll be able to do is make stronger programs, make better resources, make wiser decisions about what we do. We are a community-backed organization. We do not exist without the 25,000 plus people around the globe that are helping keep us afloat and alive. And in order to do our best work and put our best foot forward, we have to continue to do our best in providing actionable resources and data that support the work that we're doing. Our goal is to always get better, and we're going to keep working to do the best that we can. And this is part of that work.
Do you think that coming out of this, our conversations will change? I'll ask you that question again after I tell you a little story. During the social unrest, when Black Lives Matter became so well known and we all started learning more about what was going on in our environment, my son was reading YouTube comments he was watching YouTube. And first thing I told him was, don't read the comments. So we had that conversation. But he said, Mom, I don't understand why people hate me. He said, people think I'm racist and homophobic, or they're saying this about white men. He said, why is this happening? And so he was 15 at the time. I told him, honey, people don't hate you. People are in pain. There's a lot of pain happening right now. People are just having a really tough time. They're lashing out because they don't know what else to do. And I said, let's have a conversation about what that might feel like and how it feels like to you. And that was the moment that he and I opened the door to his world versus my world and how we see things differently. I got to tell you, one of the things I'm most concerned about is people like my son. I'm concerned about people who feel threatened by this conversation. And so I'm wondering, do you think that we'll be successful in changing this conversation so everyone feels like they have a voice and that they feel like they aren't going to be stepping in it if they say the wrong thing? I'm curious, do you think we're going to be able to get there?
I think we have to get there. What I know from the time I've spent doing this work and the time I've spent interacting with people all over the globe about issues around race, class, gender, et cetera, is that we do not rise unless we all rise together. That includes folks who have experienced privilege. That includes folks who experience less sexism, racism, classism in the world. I believe that we will be most successful when we get everyone to recognize and realize that this is everyone's problem and this is everyone's ability to find a solution. I hope in the conversations that we have at the summit in the spring that folks are brave enough and that we create an environment where folks are encouraged to share their questions that they feel like they can't ask. I hope folks are willing to have the kind of humility, Cindy, that you had at the top of this conversation when you were talking about the areas that you want to know more about. So I think we have to change the conversation. And I do think we're going to be successful because I know this community and I know this community really cares about making this industry the best possible. And I do believe in my heart of hearts that we are going to solve this problem together and that everyone is going to show up and bring their best foot forward. So I'm looking forward to that. There's two exciting things happening in the spring. There is the virtual PSC Summit on the State of Diversity Report. We will be aggregating the data and taking that data, putting it in report form, and giving people actionable items that they can do today, tomorrow, and in the next couple of years to use this data. Then we have our conference, the first ever PreSales Collective conference happening in August of 2023. And if you think we are not talking about the State of Diversity Report at that conference, you are absolutely wrong. It is going to be integrated in everything that we do, not only in the data that we can use to help better the programs that we're currently doing, but the conversations we're having. And that conference in August will be in person.
I'm so excited. I'm planning to be at both of them.
I'm so excited for them too. Cindy, I wonder if we can talk a little bit about the survey that we have put out. For folks that didn't hear, it is in the show notes for this podcast. So please go ahead and fill it out. Who do we want to fill out this survey? Who's our target audience?
Everyone. I think the first question is, are you in pre-sales? And if you answer no, you're ejected. Otherwise, everyone.
Why do we think it's important that everyone fill out the survey?
I think it's important for us to get a solid understanding of the demographics of our community. But also, there are some questions in there regarding some of the topics we've talked about earlier. And so we need the perspectives of everyone so we can understand how individuals are receiving some of these programs, how they're experiencing their work. And that will give us more information from which we can launch further research. So we need a solid baseline from our entire community to help us build upon so that we can actually do the meaningful work that we want to do.
And I would just say that in setting a baseline for this industry, it's really important that we can benchmark accurately. And my goal is to get thousands of people to fill out the survey. And I know the community is going to respond because I know that there are thousands of people that listen to this podcast. And there's even more out there, that it's really important. It's going to help everyone if we have this data that currently does not exist in a way that is functional or usable, so that we can all understand where we're at. We can all take the temperature, because I think it's everyone's responsibility.
Just a little spoiler, there is one box at the end. It's separated from the survey, so your name doesn't get attached to the survey. The survey is totally anonymous. But if you want to do an interview, we would love to talk with you. And you can just drop your email address there at the very, very end of it.
Absolutely.
Shawna, once we develop this report, how do you see the community using it?
So there's going to be a couple avenues for us to do this. And I want to be fully transparent that we are not planning the summit till we get the data. That would be a little irresponsible if we decided exactly what's happening before we had the numbers. But we will be having a summit in the spring of 2023 where we will be looking at the data. We'll be going through it. What did we learn? And we'll be having individual sessions on actioning the data based off our hypotheses around how being a parent or a caregiver has affected folks' ability to be in this profession, how being a woman or minority has affected folks' ability to be in this profession. We really want to understand, okay, if it's true that folks are leaving, how do we make sure that we stop folks from leaving? Because this is the best job that no one's ever heard of. And not regarding the fact that folks may have different passions and may want to move on to different industries, which is totally fine. If there are folks that are well-positioned to be amazing pre-sales professionals, we want to make sure that companies and individuals who have the power to hire or keep those folks engaged at your companies are able to do that. And so I foresee a lot of sessions will include conversations with folks who have been doing that successfully inside of the pre-sales industry, folks that maybe have left the industry and really want to talk about their experience, or folks that have recently joined and want to talk about their experience. I also believe that this is going to be a continued community conversation. Once we have the data, we'll be able to integrate it into most things that we do, including our Pre-Sales Academy program, the webinars that we do, the summits that we have, the conferences that we have, the blog posts that we put out. We really want this data to be used far and wide. And so we really look forward to giving it to the community to make sure that everyone can have this resource to use at their fingertips to help their companies and help their own personal careers.
Personally, I'm excited about the trending, because when everybody knows we're going to ask these questions, or at least a subset of these questions every single year, we're all excited to be able to measure the impact of what we do, right? That's so hard in pre-sales sometimes, but we're going to figure out how we are all impacting the inclusion and diversity of our community.
Cindy, before we wrap up, I would just love to know if there's anything else about this survey, about this report, about your work that you want to mention to the folks listening at home.
There is one thing I want to share, and that's that I'm absolutely passionate about everyone feeling like they belong. For a long time, I felt it was about making others feel included, others that look like me feel included. But my perception of that has evolved over time. And I want to make sure that every single person that's in pre-sales feels like they belong in pre-sales, and that our community reflects the demographics and reflects the community in which we live. I think that's the one thing that I am so excited about this report, and my ask for everyone to participate is this is an opportunity for us to figure out how we can all feel like we belong here.
That's such a beautiful way to end this conversation, Cindy. I'm so grateful for your time and your insights. You make our community so much better by just being here and offering your insights and resources. So thank you so much. Just as another plug, the survey is live. It is in the show notes. Please make sure you fill that out. Send it to one person on your team. This is really a community effort, and we look forward to seeing the responses. Please look out for our final report, which will be coming out in the spring of next year before our summit. And with that, I will say thank you again, Cindy, and we'll catch up soon.
Thank you, Shawna. Talk soon.
All right, PreSales Collective. I really enjoyed Shawna and Cindy's conversation, and I'm so thankful for all of their energy and effort that they've put into this State of Diversity Report 2023. Today's episode showcases how important this initiative is to the PreSales Collective and to our profession, and not just to our profession today, but the future of this profession. So I just want to end this episode with an ask. And it's a very important ask, and it's a substantial ask, but it's an ask. The first one is, please go and take the survey. Go to the episode description and click on the SurveyMonkey link and fill out the survey. Please do that. That is so important to us. But then there's an additional ask. The second ask is, no matter where you are in your organization, bring this to your leader. If you run the organization, present this at your all hands or put it in a team newsletter. Share it in your company's Slack. If you're an individual contributor, bring this to your manager. Ask your manager to share it with their peers and their employees. And if you're a manager, ask your leaders to share this report. We would love to get as many people in this profession to fill out this survey. It is so important to continue the conversation, but we can't do that without your help. So please fill out the survey. Please share the survey, and then be on the lookout for our virtual summit around this content. We are so excited to bring this to the profession as a benchmark. As mentioned in the introduction and as mentioned throughout the episode, we are taking a very comprehensive role in making sure that this State of Diversity Report 2023 is a benchmark for the profession, and that you, individual, manager, executive, can rely on this report to make informed decisions for your organization. So please take a few moments, fill out the survey, and share it with your teams. See you next week.